And I would go to every wine tasting I could find out about. And after one of these wine tastings, me and my friend that time, Shiladitya, we were super high, and this is how half the startup ideas come from, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Indianaut podcast, where we interview some of India's next best analytical and creative minds who are not only revolutionizing their own field, but at the same time transforming India's entrepreneurial ecosystem one step at a time. Our guest for the day is the co-founder of Svami, a craft beverage company. Not only is he a successful entrepreneur, he is also the host of A Niche Thing, a podcast on various subcultures like gin, rum, watches, sneakers, and more. He is one of GQ's 30 most influential young Indians of 2022. We have with us Aneesh Bhasin. Let us jump right into the conversation. Hey Aneesh, I hope you're all settled in.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Let's get started. So, Aneesh, your career has revolved around the alcohol beverage industry quite a bit. I believe you've traveled around the world exploring craft spirits here and there, right? And you started off as a photographer, and you practically explored the world, going into various bars here and there, and exploring various gins, whiskeys, rums, so on and so forth, right? You launched your own application where you compile wine-related information, which I believe is known as Hipcast back in 2012. And many years down the line, here we are, a decade later, you're the co-founder of Swami. So, in your own words, how did you come up with the idea for Swami? What inspired you to start this business? And how we like to say it here on the Indianaut podcast. Tell us your Indianaut origin story.
Okay, so let me rewind to school actually. So
Okay.
photography became a hobby in 11th standard. One of my friends, he got his dad's old Yashica camera, and we were just messing around, having fun with it. Of course, there was no digital and stuff that time, so shooting film. This is 2002. And by 12th standard, for me, it was that, you know what, I want to pursue photography. And my father was in the army. We pretty much only lived in small towns. So the concept of being a photographer to people was कि वो studio में passport size photo ले रहा होगा, right? That's the impression of what photography was.
Right.
But I knew that I was very inclined towards pursuing that as a career. So I gave my 12th from Bareilly Army School. I flunked my chemistry, gave a retest because I was scared of repeating a year. Passed that, and I took 1 day's holiday, and I started working the next day assisting photographers in Bareilly. And then I came to Bombay to pursue photography full time. I can't even say I'm a college dropout because I never went to college to begin with.
Okay.
So education wise, I'm CBSE 12 pass, but I came to Bombay, got right into the midst of things with photography. Really met some really good people. Someone like Atul Kasbekar was a mentor who's become a friend now. So generally kept my ears and eyes wide open, tried to network, started working. And I ultimately started shooting for Lonely Planet, Condé Nast Traveler, lots of travel-related lifestyle publications. And then slowly also started shooting for some alcohol brands. So way before my relationship with Swami, I started with a Diageo or a Moet Hennessy. I've shot campaigns for them. So that's how my alcohol introduction happened. And then eventually I was commissioned by the apex alcohol lobby in the country, CIABC. I was commissioned to shoot for a book on the Indian alcohol industry by them. So because of that, I ended up traveling to every winery in Nasik, and I knew nothing about alcohol. You could have given me a 50-year-old single malt, and I would have had a thumbs up to it and had it, right? So I was coming from that.
Right.
So, and before that, even when I traveled abroad and all for this, right, the only inclination was towards beer. Like I didn't care about fine wines or whiskeys or any of that stuff. So because I went to a lot of wineries, everyone would oblige me with a wine tasting, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. Seems like a cool hobby subculture sort of a situation. And then I was shooting the portrait of this gentleman called David Banford, who had brought Wine Society to India, so the Indian Wine Society of India. And after I shot his portrait, there were 8 people at around 8:30 in the evening in a small office, doing a wine tasting of wines that had gone bad. And they're like, would you like to join us and taste this? And I'm wondering why people are tasting wines that have gone bad, right? Like that makes no sense. But they were doing it more from an academic point of view to understand, right, that these wines have these faults. So when you identify that fault again, you know what's caused it and stuff like that. And literally from that day, I was like, okay, you know what? Wine seemed like a very interesting thing. I definitely want to learn more about it. And I would go to every wine tasting I could find out about. And after one of these wine tastings, me and my friend that time, Sheila Ditya, we were super high. And this is how half the startup ideas come from, right?
Right.
We were like, okay, there is no information about Indian wines out there. How about we compile, and not like compile a website, we make an app straight away, right? And these are super early days of app development, right? So he came from a tech background. I had zero tech knowledge. And we're like, okay, you know what, let's do this. Let's make an app. So the idea was that we would be the first catalog of wines available in India, starting with Indian wines. This is a stage where, apart from the bigger wineries, like let's say Sula, most wineries didn't even have proper pictures. So we actually did the exercise even to shoot every wine bottle because we wanted decent quality pictures for the app. So we launched the app. It was called Indian Wine List back in the day. That was our first name. That evolved to Hipcask when we thought that Hipcask could be a little more serious thing. The idea with Hipcask was twofold. One is suggest what to drink. And then we end up building a lot of early days of AI sort of stuff, like a whole recommendation engine, especially for wines. That evolved into a Facebook chatbot sort of a situation. So you could literally say, you could throw in lots of stuff, right? You could say, my budget is 5,000 rupees. I want a whiskey to gift. Give me some names. And it would throw a list of stuff that was available in India. Our end game was that this could be integrated into a e-commerce platform, right? So if I can enable a purchase further, that would have been great for us. We went, so that's how it was. And then we eventually met Diageo, and we met the global board. We met even Menzies and all the senior management, the global management. And they were interested to make an investment in us. And eventually that didn't happen. And we knew that there was no future for Hipcask, but we built some cool tech there. But while Hipcask happened, right, I got to know the industry quite a bit more. And that's where I got a lot of insider knowledge about what was happening. That's how I met Rahul. Rahul is one of my co-founders at Svami. He started a microbrewery, actually not a microbrewery, but not a tap room. They were the first people in Maharashtra to supply kegs to other breweries.
Okay.
But I'd met him when they were like home brewing stuff and things like that. So I knew what was happening in that space. Rahul was also talking about Stranger that time because he also started Stranger and Sons. I knew the Greater Than Boys from before they started Now Spirit. So we knew there was something happening in the space, like craft spirits were going to come up. And meanwhile, my third partner was my brother-in-law. He was in Singapore and he was in the coffee business. And he was like, you know what, I'm thinking of doing something in coffee. And I was like, what about you do something here and perhaps you could work together. So that's how this whole idea came about, that Sahil wanted to do something in non-alcoholic beverages. That was exciting to me as well. And I was just chatting once with Rahul. We were getting beers and he's like, dude, this sounds exciting. There's nothing cool non-alcoholic in the country. I want to be a part of this. And that's how the seeds of Svami were born. Then let's just create a cool non-alcoholic contemporary brand out of India, because apart from Schweppes, so either there were Schweppes or there were a few local players here and there, right? Like you'll have Catch in Delhi or you'll have Twist in Goa and stuff like that. But there was nothing premium out there. And that's how photography led me to alcohol. That led me to Swami.
Right. That's an extremely fascinating story, Aneesh, and honestly, the way, like you mentioned, how you transitioned from being a photographer to being a technologist, essentially by creating something like a recommendation agent, trying to create a recommendation agent back in 2012, to then being, the co-founder of a mixer and non-alcoholic beverages brand. It's an amazing story altogether. So let's fast forward to the current snapshot, right? Swami launched in 2018. Okay. And since then, Swami has reached a revenue of, I believe, close to $2 million in the financial year of 2022. Swami has
Yeah.
won awards at the IWSC in 2021 and 22. Swami has received funding from the likes of the Mumbai Angel Network, Rukum Capital Trust, and more. Swami's launched numerous products. You're available in international markets. I think it's safe to say that Swami is not just a excellent household name, but it's also a success story from an entrepreneurial perspective. So, if you were to take a step back, how have the past 5 years been for you?
Oh, when you summarize a timeline, it all looks nice and cool. But as we all know, there are always ups and downs in this space. Uh, when we started in 2018, for us it was almost like a soft launch. We were a team of 5 people, literally, including production. Oh, also since day one, we've done our own production. We don't contract manufacture. Uh,
Yeah.
and that was a very conscious call we took. And it's unheard of in this space today that people manufacture themselves. The whole thing is be asset light, outsource everything. And we're like, we're not doing this as a what if sort of a thing. We are serious about this from day one. Like, it's not like something we're going to start and see how it goes in 6 months and take a call. So when we started in 2018, we were literally 5 people. Uh, we did our first batch of bottling, literally put the products in our car and hit restaurant to restaurant. Now we knew that between my network and Silent Raul's network, we knew most of the restaurateurs in the city, right? So we knew that meeting to ho jayega, right? People will oblige us for a tasting. That we definitely can
Right.
get through. But then the product has to speak. There's only so much. If my product's not speaking for itself, a restaurant, a friend will oblige me by ordering once, right? Ordering twice. Not going to be long term. So we did these rounds, restaurant to restaurant, and one of that time, Riaz impresario, Riaz was launching one of the socials that was like a food court. So we were anyways invited for like a preview for the industry night sort of a situation. So I carried some stocks there, and Riaz was like, "We're launching tomorrow or day after. Send us the products, and if you can get a
Right.
signage, we'll put a signage also." We didn't even have a signage design or something that time. So like Riaz said, he'll put a signage, like get it made urgently, right? So initial days were that, right? And when we launched in a separate, we had a different bottle when we launched. So we had an off-the-shelf bottle because we couldn't have afforded a custom bottle that time.
Okay.
So like, let's put out a minimum viable product in the market. Let's see the response. And from there, we'll take
Right.
the next steps, right? Do we need to change the liquid? Do we need to change the packaging? Although we knew packaging change would be required at a certain point of time. So we launched in a very, very small way in 2018. Raised our first round of angel, like an angel round of about 2 CR or something that time. Sorry, 4 CR that time. And straight away started working on 2-3 things, right? Hiring people, building our teams, and packaging. So we redid our branding and packaging, worked with a very good agency from the UK. We are very happy with our packaging today, but that was also a path to get to, right? But started hiring teams out, and we're a FMCG business, right? You need teams. You cannot, and I've seen in the last 2 years, and for me, this whole D2C is a bubble for a lot of brands. You cannot build 1,000
Okay.
crore FMCG brands in India. According to me, you cannot build like FMCG food and beverage brands D2C in India. That'll never, according to me, that won't happen. You have to be in shelves in supermarkets and grocery stores. So we knew we had to
Right.
build a
Right.
team, and ultimately, that is what was important. And today we're about 65 people, predominantly salespeople, and then marketing, then production is a very lean team. So we've come a long way from there, but it's been a lot of
Right.
effort on 2 fronts, right? When we went to market, there was really nothing apart from Schweppes, like I was saying earlier. So a lot of restaurants would say, but you're a new brand and you're Indian, so why are you more expensive? And how do you explain to everyone that Schweppes is Coca-Cola, that's the largest beverage company in the world? There is no ways we can match their price points at, like, their scale is another thing, right?
Right. Right.
So I think for us, the first year and a half was also just to educate the market a lot.
Right.
that there can be a premium product. What's this category? Our first set of products were much lower on sugar than Schweppes. That was great in Bombay, but that didn't work in Delhi. Then we came out with our original tonic that has a little more sugar and a little more quinine. Uh, that then started working in Delhi. So a lot of learnings down the way, but for us, the first 2 years was just building brand awareness. And then we were like, okay, the third year is going to be our year. We had major plans, and then COVID happened. So those kind of things went down the drain for everyone, not only for us. But it's been a fascinating journey. But I think like everyone who starts a business, right, it looks very simple and easy from the outside, but it's a lot of work at the back end. And again,
Right.
it's a solid all round team effort. There is nothing that an entrepreneur can do by himself, or
Mm.
like it has to be a solid team effort. And I think we've been lucky to be able to build a really good team.
Right. 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 So not just collaborations, but Swami has, also organized or participated in various community events in the past 5 years. And when I read all of this, and I've gotten to know about you and gotten to know you a bit in the past couple of days, I can see your personal footprint on how how Swami engages with this community. I see your passion, your excitement, and being able to use Swami as an extension of yourself, or your own interests, to serve its loyal fans. So what is your approach when it comes towards community building, partnerships, and distribution?
So I'll tell you about the distribution thing quickly earlier, because like I said, I think offline distribution is super critical. But today we'll be at a modern bazaar or a food hall, but we'll also be at a Shell petrol pump in Gujarat, right? So you ultimately have to be pretty much everywhere where a Diet Coke or a Red Bull could be. So in distribution, that's what we're building out on. Of course, online is important, but we never, I don't think, be an online focused business. Quick commerce is cool, but that's again fed via offline distribution. So, and again, there's so much effort put on that every day, which is not glamorous, which is not what you'll see on Instagram and stuff, but that's all behind the scenes, right? When it comes to marketing or building the brand out, of course, I think ultimately community is everything, right? And we've done a lot of effort on two fronts. One is consumers, the other is industry, right? Like ultimately, we want bartenders to be our friends. And one of our first hires was Jatin. In fact, yesterday was his last day at Swami, but we had hired him or this whole position of a brand ambassador, and we have 3 brand ambassadors now. Their their daily work is to meet bartenders, tell them about the product, work with them on new recipes. Uh, and we've done a training for every restaurant that we pour at in India, which is ridiculous amount of time and effort that goes in, right? But any restaurant that serves us, the gentleman who's serving you will know about our product. So we've done a lot. We've put in a lot of effort on that front. Even when COVID happened, and everyone was headless, right? That time, like what's going to happen? Restaurants were shut. And this is something I'm very proud about. But within like 20 days, we launched an online competition for bartenders in India. You could be a bartender
Okay.
from, uh, as long as you were a bar in India with a license to serve alcohol, you could take part. And we explicitly said this is not that you don't have to be a Swami account. Even if you have a Schweppes exclusive contract, you can take part, because there's not a hard sell about keeping Swami. And we did an online competition that time, and we gave away 8 lakhs of cash as prizes, which
Okay.
was crazy. And we were
Right.
actually the first company in the beverage business, including alcohol in India, to give away any relief in terms of cash to bars during COVID. So a lot of these kind of things we've done, whether it's uh, engaging with them in a thing like this. There was World Bartender Day that happened. We gave away an iPhone for that on an online competition. So engaging with all communities is super important. We like with consumers, we do this experience called Make Your Own Tonic, which we started at Magnetic last year, and we've been doing it at a few places where we actually make them try a lot of different flavors that we keep experimenting with. And you get to do a tasting with our team. You get to
Okay.
almost play with flavors like how we do during R&D. And ultimately, you can make your own flavor and we'll bottle it on the spot. You customize the label with your name and take it home, right? So we've tried to build experiences that people can engage with us more rather than just seeing the product, right? And today there is so much noise, especially because of social media. Like everyone will you can send your product to 100 people, they'll put up a story, and then what, right? That happens with
Right,
10
right,
brands every day on someone's story. So engaging with consumers and trade for us has been super important. And we've never looked at ourselves as a commodity brand, right? We've always looked at ourselves as a lifestyle choice. And even the partnerships we've done, right? If I look at a partnership like Moet Hennessy, we did 3 mixers with them for Glenmorangie, Belvedere, and Hennessy. These are brands that I love and I admire. The fact that I could co-create a product with them happened for 2 reasons. One is that they wanted to work with an Indian brand for the Indian market. They could have worked with anyone. They could have worked with Fever Tree or any global giant. But they're like, no, we want to work with a local brand. And the other cool thing was that, and this is the first time globally, Moet Hennessy or the LVMH group has worked with another beverage company. So when this project was in the works, we kept sometimes saying, oh, this is actually happening, this is actually happening. And this was also during COVID. So it's not like we could take samples and go to France or Poland or whatever and do tasting. So we had to ship samples, we all get on a Zoom call and taste products. So on one hand, we did a partnership with perhaps the biggest luxury company in the world, right? On the other hand, we're doing a partnership with Bira, which is super local, right?
right,
On the other
right,
hand, we'll do a partnership with a super kick store, which is super hyper local in a sneaker store. Or we'll do a
right,
partnership with Amazon, which gives us a very different audience.
right,
So we want to work with people who get our wavelength and we understand them. And to
right.
me, who's any brand who's putting out quality products, right? That's super important. And that's how we've done our partnerships. And we have some very exciting stuff coming up as well.
Okay, okay. When you mentioned super kicks, I actually recalled that there was a drop that happened. I think in the past 1 year
Yeah.
at super kicks,
We did
and it,
we worked with them on the Nike Air Max day. So we did a drop, a t-shirt drop. And that's legit one of my favorite t-shirts. And the moment they send the first design, their design team is superb, all internal stuff. When they sent that
right,
first design, I was like, this is it. Like there is zero things to change on this.
right,
So fun stuff. Again for us, and this is a theme which is recurring in my journey or my life or even the podcast now. I think if you start to appreciate things, that that appreciation factor continues from things to things. It's not about one particular thing in life, but it'll be about everything in life. So if you care about a good beverage, it could be your coffee that you really care about. It'll translate to what kind of beers or cocktails you might drink or wine. Tomorrow you're going to buy a t-shirt, you think twice, okay, what else available? Is there a better brand? Is there better quality available? So is there a story behind it? So I think once you start to appreciate things, it just snowballs into every aspect.
right, right, right. So this is something I was actually meaning to ask you later, but I think right now is the perfect time to ask you. So besides being the co-founder of Swami, you're also a podcast host now. You're a podcaster with your own
Yeah,
podcast
very
known as
new.
A Niche Thing. Right, right, right. So like while researching for this episode, I came across 2 interviews of yours for leading news outlets. Okay, and I'll be quoting the interviews for this bit. Okay, so here's the first one. Just allow me a minute. Okay. So how they described you, and it was actually quite, it was quite interesting to read. But how they described you is that whenever he gets a little time, Anish relaxes with a cigar and watches YouTube tech videos of things he will never buy. He's a sneakerhead, which fits well into the image of a lifestyle company co-founder. Here's another description, by the way. Uh, the 37-year-old who made drinking tonic water cool for a whole generation loves indulging in cigars, sneakers, vinyl, gadgets, coffee, and booze. He is as much a podcaster as a part-time DJ, and he is an entrepreneur and also a party animal. So, I think you just touched upon your fascination with these subcultures, and that led to the formation of a niche thing. So, in your own words, what is the core ethos of a niche thing, and how did you get interested in podcasting, and what inspired you to start your own show?
So, a niche thing is simply a podcast for curious people. And I look at the podcast as someone who wants to consume the same kind of content. Like, if you would ask me who's my audience, it's someone like me, perhaps 10 years younger to a few years elder to my current age,
Right.
right? Uh, so I would talk about a lot of these things on my Instagram, for example, right? But Instagram is not, to me, a searchable medium, right? Like YouTube, for example, is a proper search engine. After Google, it'll be the
Right.
biggest search engine, right? Uh, so my whole thing is that if I'm talking about things that I like, why not put it up in a slightly more archival sort of a way, right? In an Instagram story or
Right.
a reel or something. So that's how the idea of the podcast happened in my head. And I know the folks at IVM, I know the two co-founders. I just wrote them an email saying this is what I have in mind. And I'm sure they go through like 100 pitches a month or something. So Amit and I spoke earlier and he's like, okay, this sounds cool. Let's explore this. And they're like, what do you think? Is this going to be a recurring thing? Is this going to be a season-wise thing? And I was like, I have a very long-term view on this, right? Again, this is not a 6-month, 1-year thing. I see this going on for quite a few years. Also, from the standpoint that lifestyle content in India there are not too many avenues that,
Right.
like in terms of lifestyle content coming out of India, I'm just surprised that, to me, there's a very big void there. So the idea with the niche thing was that I don't want to specifically keep it to F&B. That's very easy for me to do, but it's not a podcast about alcohol. But it's a podcast about interesting things. And these are some things that I'm into myself. There are some things I want to learn about, like, for example, fashion and streetwear. I only know a little bit, very tiny bit, but I want to learn more.
Right.
Why is vintage fashion cool, right? Relationships, coffee, tech, a lot of, like, I've given myself full freedom. And even IVM, who are my partners in the podcast, they've also given me complete creative freedom there to speak or get guests who I want to get. And yeah, the idea is just, it's a podcast for curious. That's about it. And I've got a lot of my education from YouTube, to be honest. Like, I will watch a lot of YouTube myself. And I won't say I'm a seasoned podcast. I'm very, very new. I think we're about 4 months in. But touchwood, we are on some of the Spotify charts and also people are listening. But it's fun. And I'm learning a lot because of the podcast as well. So that for me is, again, a very important aspect in life, right? That you have to keep... You not only want to surround yourself with smarter people, but you also want to surround yourself with interesting people. Now, that whole thing that don't be the smartest person in the room, which I 100% agree with, but you also need to be with more interesting people, not only smart people. And for me, the podcast is somewhere also that, right? You're just having a lot of different conversations. Like one of the episodes that's going to come out in Jan, I think early Jan, is about Air Jordan 1's sneakers.
Okay.
That was the agenda of the episode, but that became a free-flowing conversation, right? It spoke about a lot of other things. And it's just that, it's like how two people would meet and talk about something cool, and it can go somewhere else and it'll come back. And
Right.
it's just that.
Right. So, I'm not saying this because you're a guest on my show, but Niche Thing has actually become one of my favorite podcasts in
Thank you
recent
so
times,
much.
right?
Thank you so much. Thank
I
you.
have particularly loved your episodes on watches, fine dining, perfumes, and there's so much about perfumery that I did not know that I learned from that episode
Same.
itself, right? The high, medium, low notes, so on and so forth, right? And watches.
Yeah.
So basically, I have a small set of friends with whom I discuss watches, and like that aspirational aspect of like owning an Omega, or owning, say, a Rolex, or a JLC or something like that, and just hearing two people talk about that in such a passionate way, sharing their experiences of how all over the world they've been to various watch boutiques, and they've, like, you've seen a Tudor watch, you talked about that experience. That was extremely fun to listen to. But my favorite episode was the one on fine dining, because that was a
Oh,
really emotional episode for me to for me to listen to as well, right? Because while listening to
yeah.
it, I was actually recalling how my family back in October 2022, we went to the House of Ming for a dinner, and the House of Ming is it's like a legacy restaurant in Delhi, right? For Oriental food. And like how in that episode your guests were speaking about how children, like my generation goes to five-star hotels because our parents used to go to five-star hotels. And my parents were like, whenever we go to the house of Ming, they used to talk about how before they got married, like they would visit the house of Ming for dates. And there's that emotion attached to the place, or there's that legacy that the place has for you as a family, right? And that was actually the last place I went to with my father out for a formal dining experience before he passed away recently. So that was a pretty heavy episode for me to listen to, and I can completely relate with what your guests were speaking about and the passion with which they were speaking about. And I think that beautifully captures your podcast, for me at least, that it's a beautiful celebration of these subcultures and the history and emotions attached to these to these aspects that you love to be curious about, essentially. So in your own words, I love for you to tell the viewers of the Indianaut podcast about a particularly memorable episode or guest you've had on the show, and what made it so special.
So I was actually thinking about this recently because I was thinking, should I be doing like a recap sort of an episode about things I've learned from every episode? But I think there have been a few things that really stuck with me, right? Like one episode was on polyamory or non-monogamous relationships. And I was asking my guest, Ailey, I was asking her, so you have to be really emotionally strong to even think of exploring that, right? And she's like, no, you need to be extremely vulnerable. You don't have to be strong. And that line is like, yeah, it is okay to be vulnerable. And that's where a lot of learnings happen. And that's where a lot of relearnings happen. That to me really stuck. That was one thing. Then the fine dining episode is just like it's candid banter, right? I got called. I got a few messages from people from five-star hotels saying, "How could you guys say this? How could you guys say that?" But like,
Right,
and
right.
actually, the reply, and actually, I had to reply to someone saying, "But last time I was at your hotel and I ordered a Negroni, there was no Campari in it, so let's not even go there."
Um,
Uh, but honestly, lots of stuff. I've done one episode on denims recently on jeans,
right,
and it blows my mind that when I learned about denims about 8 years back, it blew my mind that honestly, to answer your point about one episode, I actually can't even say one episode. Everything has something really interesting and unique. Like my guest on the denim episode, he started a denim company out of India called Cora, and one of his pairs of denims
right,
he's not
right.
washed for 7 years. And I was like, not washing a pair of
Okay.
7 years. Like I've held out for a year, but 7 years is like fascinating. So again, a solid plug for my podcast. Please go check it out. Fascinating episodes on multiple things.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. So, Anish, let's switch gears now. Okay. I want to talk about the future, and I want to talk about the future from three
Yeah.
aspects. So let's start with the first one. So there's an exciting development that happened at Swami recently. So Swami has, received financing or funding from Third Eye Distillery, which is who are the makers of Stranger and Sons, right? And they have acquired a controlling stake in the company, which is
Yeah.
now valued at 100 crores. So tell us about that. What went to the deal? How does this partnership align with Swami's vision? And what's next for Swami?
So I know the team on the other side really, really well, right? Rahul's a common co-founder, and then there's Sakshi and Vidur. And when we were trying to figure this deal out, in fact, I would have a lot of separate conversations with Sakshi and Vidur because Rahul was still common between the two companies. But from what I'd seen of how they've built out Stranger and other brands, like Short Story and other things coming up, they're importing plantation rum. What I'd seen of them building the brand, and when I spoke to them a lot more seriously about us coming together, because then it's a lot more serious in terms of future and stuff, everything was like we're all on the same page, right? It's a very simple idea that we want to create world class brands out of India for India. And of course, wherever we can export, we'll export, right? But at a global level, our quality stands. You can put Swami next to any other tonic water or ginger ale on any shelf in the world, and there's no problem. You put a bottle of Stranger on any bar in the world, it'll belong there, right? It's not out of place. Uh, so that way, our visions are very, very similar. And the exciting thing for me is the talent pool that we have in the company now. So when I'm in the room with a lot of people like that, right, the future is so exciting. So the idea is to just build out more products, work on distribution, but at the same time, we are not like, for example, Swami and Strangers, not like we have to work exclusively. So Swami works with pretty much all alcohol companies, right? So none of that changes for us. Wherever we can leverage our teams, we'll do. But yeah, it's a super exciting partnership, and again, it's just really interesting people coming together because, like I said, if you look at how Strangers been built in the last 4 5 years, it's incredible.
Okay, that sounds great. And let's come to the second aspect now. What's next in store for your podcast? Like, I think I recently, like, for viewers to understand when this episode was recorded, I believe the latest episode that released was on the Aeropress. So, if
Yeah.
you were to say, look into the next couple of episodes, what can your viewers expect?
So again, there'll be recurring themes on the podcast, right? Coffee is going to be something that I'll always end up speaking about. So the first episode on the podcast was about coffee. In fact, it was titled "Why You Should Love Coffee More Than You Love Food." Because if you call yourself a foodie or you like food, you have to like good coffee. And I don't mean a cappuccino with sugar. I just mean like really good black coffee. We
Right.
just did the second coffee episode, which is with two of the Aeropress champions. Again, it's a fascinating thing. To whoever may not know this, but AeroPress is like a coffee brewing method. It's a plastic apparatus that you use for brewing coffee. And there's a competition around it. And I've taken part in the competition for 2 years. There are regional competitions. So I was in the Bombay competition. I got kicked out in the first round, but Bombay, like city winners, will go to the national championship, and each country will have a winner that will then go to Australia for the global championship. It's a fascinating thing because everyone gets the same coffee and you have the same AeroPress to make your coffee. All you can play around with is how much coffee you're putting, how hot your water is going to be, and how much time you're going to brew
The
for.
ratio. Right.
And it is crazy how different coffees you can get right out of that same process. It's really really fascinating to understand that culture of AeroPress. So we talk about that and the award-winning recipes by these two people. Next couple of episodes that are coming up is one episode is with these two really cool bartenders from Singapore, Jesse and Gabe. So we talk about, and along with Som from Soul Company. So four of us talk about 5 bars that we love in Asia. There's not a
Okay.
ranking. There's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, but places we just like to go to. There's a very solid 20 bar list of Asia that you should definitely try, and just our reasons, right, why you should go there. It's not like some of these are not fancy. Well, one of my recommendations is in a hawker market, right? So
Okay.
just why we like to go drink at certain places. Then that Air Jordan 1 episode's coming up. I'm doing an interesting episode on leather because I think leather is another sort of a scam, I
Right.
would say. Like the whole genuine leather branding, like genuine leather is the worst quality of leather you can get. But they just did a great marketing exercise by calling it genuine leather, right? So yeah, fun episodes in the pipeline.
I'm curious to learn about that one. Let's talk about your future. So, as Aneesh Bhasin, what exciting plans or projects do you have in the works that we can come to expect in the next, say, 5 years, 10 years, whatever time horizon you want to talk about?
I think for us, it's very clear the next 5 years is just Swami, right? Everything else is on the side. Like podcast is a fun thing. It's not a it's not a everyday thing, but for the next 5 to 10 years, it's just building out Swami very clearly. Uh, Swami has its own plans of the future. We see very diverse range of products, so that's a lot of work. So that goes nowhere. Apart from that, personally, I definitely want to just keep learning. I want to be better at running. I'm running my first full marathon in Jan, of my marathon. So do that, travel a lot more. I want to go to Cuba, learn more about cigars. Yeah, just double down on everything I like, I guess. That's about it.
Right. Right. That sounds awesome. That sounds awesome. And Anish, you are a successful entrepreneur, or as you know, we like to dub you an Indianaut, right? Because you've built in India for India, and that product is now being showcased throughout the world. So I have one last question for you. What advice do you have for other aspiring Indianauts or entrepreneurs per se?
I would say, just before you think of starting anything, talk to people who've built brands in that space and get very honest advice. Because I think one thing that we do in India is that we celebrate, fundraise, and a lot of those kind of things that sound cool. But man, the effort that goes behind things, right? Like just whatever you're looking to enter, talk to people who've raised money, talk to people who've not raised money, talk to people who've raised money and shut down, see how their journey has been, right? With their product, with their investors. So you know how when you raise money, an investor will do DD on you, right? I think you should do DD on the business and people you're going to be working with. I think that's super, super important. And a lot of times we just glorify things and look at startups in very rosy tinted sort of a way, right? But just think twice about how tough things can be, because I think that aspect just in India somewhere gets overlooked, at least according to me.
Definitely, definitely. That makes sense. I mean, I think that's the bias that forms, right? We hear more about the successes than the misses, and it
Yeah.
it just creates that perception that it's easy to fundraise, it's easy to without having the right product, just keep building and building and building because they
Yeah,
say
and fundraise is not a sign of success. Like you could have
right,
fundraised hundreds
exactly,
of crores and millions and shut, right? Like raising money is not
right,
the like raising money is not the startup game.
right, right.
That's
I think
money is
raising money
not
is more
gonna.
right. I think raising money is more an outlook on how well you can sell a story, but not sell a product. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
more about that. Yeah. Sounds good, Anish. Thank you so much for joining us today. We
Thank you
wish
so much for
you
having me.
absolutely. We wish you, Swami, a niche thing, all the very best for the future. By the way, I just want to do one call out. A niche thing, it's an amazing name, and
No, thank you.
that's quite smart of you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this episode. The Indianaut podcast is available on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to receive all updates on the upcoming episodes. We'll see you in the next one.